I remember the first time I stumbled across the old cave. The fog hung low, curling around the jagged rocks like it was alive, and the air smelled faintly of damp earth and something older, something unclaimed by time. My footsteps whispered against the stone, fading instantly into the silence, as if the world itself had pressed pause. Pale light from my lantern wavered against the walls, and for a moment I could have sworn the shadows were breathing with me. There was a hum, soft at first, almost melodic, like the faint echo of a voice long forgotten. I followed it deeper, each step pulling me further from the safety of the outside world. The walls closed in, and the ground underfoot seemed to thrum with anticipation, vibrating beneath my boots. Somewhere above, water dripped, but the sound was distant, warped, as if echoing through a hollow place between reality and memory. I should have turned back then. The feeling was subtle, almost polite, like someone or something watching me, waiting for a moment when I would falter. But curiosity, that quiet, insistent itch, led me onward. And then I heard it, a whisper that wasn't my own, sliding from one stone arch to another. It called my name. That's when I saw it. The fog was thick that evening. It hugged the ground, curling around my ankles, soft and cold. The forest beyond the path had gone quiet. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. I found the entrance almost by accident, a narrow split in the rocks, partly hidden beneath moss and fallen leaves. It felt like it was waiting. I crouched, peering into the darkness. A faint hum rose from deep inside, or maybe from my own chest. The first step was slow. The air smelled damp, like earth and something older than wood or stone. The fog followed me in, curling and settling in corners where light shouldn't reach. The walls were smooth at first, then jagged, almost like teeth, and then faces, carved faces, pale and still, pressed into the rock. Eyes closed, mouth slightly open. They weren't perfect, some twisted, some blurred, but they were human enough to make me shiver. A faint flicker of light danced along the walls. It wasn't my torch. Or maybe it was reflecting in a way that made the shadows twist. They moved, not with me, not against me, but around me, slow, patient, whispering in a language I almost understood. I stepped forward. The air thickened. Each breath tasted like iron and wet stone. A soft brush ran along my arm. I froze. No one was there. The hum rose again. It wasn't loud, but it filled the cavern, pressing against my ears, against my chest. It was patient, curious, almost gentle. Shadows leaned and stretched. One seemed to stretch long enough to touch the ceiling, then curl back. I blinked, and it was gone, replaced by the wall and its carved faces. They stared now, or maybe I imagined it. The floor was uneven. Small rocks shifted beneath my weight. A draft ran past my cheek, cold and wet, carrying a faint scent of smoke. Or was it the fog itself, burning slow somewhere in the distance? I wanted to leave, but my feet wouldn't. Something urged me further. The carvings seemed to whisper encouragement or warning. I couldn't tell. The walls began to hum in tandem with my heartbeat. Every pulse echoed back as a soft vibration through the stones. It was intimate, pressing, quiet in a way that made the silence louder. A single shadow separated from the rest. It hovered, closer now, and I felt the air stir around it. Soft footsteps brushed near me, though the ground was empty. I reached out, and the touch vanished, gone like mist in morning light. I leaned closer to the carvings. The stone was cold, slick with damp. The eyes of one face seemed to flicker open in the pale light. Or maybe it was just a trick of my own reflection, blurred in the sheen of wet rock. A sigh, or a voice, echoed from somewhere deep. I couldn't place its origin. It wasn't human, yet it was gentle, almost mournful. I swallowed hard. The light flickered again, revealing more faces. Smaller ones, hidden in corners, watching. Their mouths were slightly open, like they wanted to speak. But no words came. I pressed my hand against the wall. The stone was warm for a moment, then cold again, almost breathing beneath my fingers. A chill ran down my spine. My own pulse was loud. The cavern hummed with it, joining, folding over itself, waiting. I turned to leave. The path out seemed further than I remembered. Shadows leaned closer, curling around my legs like slow smoke. The fog whispered at my ears, brushing my hair, teasing, patient. I walked backward, eyes on the walls. Faces followed me. Some smiled, some frowned, all of them silent. The entrance finally came into view. The fog was thinner here, pale light spilling through. I stepped out. The forest was quiet again. The hum faded, but I could still feel it, behind the stones, beneath the earth. Curious, waiting. I didn't look back. Not yet. The forest had gone quiet by the time I reached the old mine. Fog hung low, brushing my calves. The evening was cold, damp. Even the air felt heavy, as though waiting. The entrance yawned like a mouth. Wooden beams sagged, gray with age. Stone walls stretched inward, fading into darkness. A low hum pressed beneath my feet. It wasn't wind. It wasn't water. It was alive. I stepped forward. Each footfall vibrated, a slow, steady pulse beneath the soles of my shoes. It felt like a heartbeat mine or something older. The walls were damp, slick with condensation. Every rustle of my sleeve echoed off the stone. I could smell the earth, metallic and wet, almost breathing. Shadows clung to the corners, not still, but patient. I paused. Something shifted. A crate I had glanced at a moment before was now slightly turned. A small pile of rocks had moved. I hadn't touched them. I blinked. They were still, but different. The hum rose again. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated the air, humming through my teeth, my chest. I could feel it in my bones. It carried a curiosity, patient and slow, like the mind was watching me as closely as I watched it. I walked deeper. The walls closed in, dripping cold water onto my hands. My fingers tingled where the droplets fell. A shiver ran along my spine. Soft footsteps or echoes of my own seemed to follow. Yet when I turned, there was nothing. Pale light spilled from cracks in the ceiling. It danced across rocks and forgotten tools. Shadows twisted with it. One shadow lingered longer than it should. I couldn't tell if it was mine or someone else's. The hum grew steady, rhythmic, a pulse beneath the ground. I knelt, pressing a hand to the stone floor. It throbbed, slow and deliberate. I drew back. The stone was empty again. I tried to listen past it. Soft taps echoed from deeper within. Rustling, movement where none should exist. Leaves of paper, old ledgers, seemed to whisper questions I couldn't answer. I bent down. Nothing was written, nothing moved, yet everything felt alive. I walked carefully, tracing the beams with my fingers. Every touch sent tiny vibrations up my arms. The hum pressed against me, curious, almost conversational. I could feel it shifting, ebbing when I moved, returning when I stopped. I stopped entirely. Silence fell, thick as the fog outside. Then, almost imperceptibly, a breath brushed my ear. Cold, wet, patient. No one was there. The shadows pulled in corners, gathering slowly. A faint metallic scent lingered, like old tools left too long underground. The hum became a whispering thrum. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't friendly either. It was the where. I turned again, seeking the entrance. The path seemed longer than before. The mind stretched outward, infinite in its stillness. I felt watched, not by eyes I could see, but by something patient, just beyond perception. A small beam of light flickered along the wall. The hum aligned with my heartbeat. Every pulse vibrated the air, the floor, my chest. I could almost sense shapes shifting in the darkness. But each time I blinked, the movement paused. I took another step, and then another. The mind seemed to breathe with me. Soft footsteps echoed, rustling behind tools and rocks. I dared not look. Finally, I reached the opening. Fog pressed against my face, cool and damp. The forest was still. The hum faded, leaving only a soft, lingering vibration in my chest. I stepped out. The mind was quiet again, still and waiting. I could feel its gaze lingering, curious. And though I walked away, I knew it remembered me, waiting for when I might return. The mountain path was narrow, carved from stone and dirt. Fog clung to the edges, thick and pale, curling around roots and boulders. The air was damp, carrying a faint scent of pine and cold earth. Each step was tentative. The ground was slick, moss-soft beneath my shoes. I felt alone, though the fog made it hard to know for sure. Shadows lingered where the light refused to reach. Shapes appeared at the corner of my eyes. A flicker of movement, then gone. I blinked. Nothing remained but mist and the trail ahead. Yet the feeling of being watched settled into my chest. A chill ran across my neck. It wasn't wind. Something had passed, just out of reach. I could almost hear it. A breath, a shuffle, the quiet drag of fabric or fur. The fog thickened. Trees blurred into gray towers. Rocks seemed to shift subtly as I walked, though I knew it was impossible. Every step felt measured, observed, recorded. I paused. The silence pressed against my ears. A rustling whispered along the undergrowth. I could smell damp leaves, soil, something faintly metallic. The trail ahead disappeared into nothing. Shapes danced to the edges again. Vague, pale, insistent. Each one gone when I focused on it, leaving only fog and shadow. I felt my heartbeat echo in my ears. Every pulse seemed louder than it should be. A cold gust swept past. My jacket shifted, brushing my arm. I felt certain someone or something had moved beside me, but when I turned, there was only fog, only stillness. The path narrowed further, stone walls rising on either side. The fog swirled in spirals, curling around roots and rocks like slow smoke. The air smelled heavier now, wet and earthy. A low hum, or maybe my own thoughts, seemed to vibrate along the trail. I tried to steady my steps. Every soft footfall echoed, yet vanished into mist. The shapes lingered in the corner of my vision. I knew they were watching. Patient, the chill returned, brushing the back of my neck again. I shivered. The mist felt almost sentient, pressing closer. The path ended in a narrow curve, and I stopped. All movement ceased. The shapes vanished. The hum faded. Only the fog remained, dense and unmoving. I could feel the anticipation in the air, thick and quiet. I waited, alone, surrounded by silence, my breath loud against the stillness. The trail seemed to hold its breath too, as though waiting for me, or for something else. I stepped forward, slowly, and the fog swallowed me completely. Everything became soft gray. A pause, heavy and expectant. I did not move. The limestone cave was eroded, jagged, and silent. A thin mist hovered near the ground, cool and damp against my ankles. Even the air smelled older here, stone and minerals, and something faintly metallic. My footsteps echoed softly, bouncing off walls that leaned inward. Shadows stretched, long and slow, gathering where the pale light couldn't reach. I felt them watching, though there was no one there. I crouched to examine a wall. Carvings and erosion made shapes that almost looked like eyes. Not human exactly. Something more patient. I could feel their gaze pressing against my skin. A soft rustle followed. My own steps? Or something else moving just behind me, echoing me perfectly. I paused. The air grew heavy, humid. A faint hum vibrated through the stones. I walked deeper. Shadows flickered at the corner of my vision. Following, I could smell damp stone and wet earth. My fingers brushed the walls, rough, cold, alive in texture. The shapes in the limestone seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. A chill ran along my neck. Soft footsteps echoed behind me. I turned sharply. Nothing. The cave held only shadows, stretching and curling like smoke. I continued slowly. The hum grew steady, a low vibration beneath my feet. I could feel it in my chest. Shadows leaned closer, gathering where the light was faintest. I imagined eyes, many patient, unblinking, watching me. The air grew thicker. My breath came slow, soft. Each inhale carried the scent of damp limestone and something older, something hidden. I felt my pulse in my ears, a soft drumming that matched the subtle hum of the cave. I crouched near a fallen rock. Shadows stretched long, then vanished as I blinked. I pressed my hand to the stone floor. It was cold, rough, alive somehow. The cave seemed to breathe with me. A sudden rustle, faint but deliberate, made me freeze. I dared not turn my head. The echo of footsteps followed my own steps, then fell silent. A pause waiting. I could feel it. I rose slowly. The walls seemed taller, closer. Shapes shifted in periphery, just out of focus. I could smell wet stone and iron, and feel the gaze of something patient pressing through the shadows. I retraced my steps. The cave entrance came into view. I expected relief, but the feeling did not leave. The shadows lingered near the walls. Eyes, watching, patient, unblinking. I stepped out. The air was lighter, the mist dissipating. Yet I could still feel it. The gaze following me, silent and calm. Not threatening, exactly, but aware. I walked down the trail, away from the cave. The limestone receded behind me, but the memory remained. A weight in my chest, a soft in the mind. The eyes and the stone were patient, and they remembered. The canyon stretched wide and silent beneath a pale morning sky. Wind curled through the cliffs, carrying dust and the faint scent of pine. The air was crisp, but heavy, like it was holding its breath. I spoke just a whisper. The canyon returned it, but not quite right. My words twisted, warped, curling back at me with a strange insistence. They weren't my words anymore. A soft echo came again. It spoke of warnings I hadn't imagined. I shivered. The stones felt alive under my fingers, cold and rough. The wind brushed my cheeks, damp with mist. I walked along the edge. The echoes followed, slipping into each step I took. Rustling rocks, shifting sand, subtle vibrations beneath my boots. I felt the air move around me, carrying faint, almost human breaths. Eyes, or the idea of them, traced me from the cliffs. The canyon twisted shadows across the ground. A glint of pale light reflected off stone, then vanished. Each echo bent closer to me. I whispered question. It answered, not in words I spoke, but in tones I recognized familiar. I stopped. A voice, faint but precise, carried my name, or something close enough to it that my chest tightened. The wind pressed against me, carrying whispers through the cliffs. I could smell dust and cold stone, a metallic tang underneath. Footsteps echoed behind me, soft, careful, matching my pace. I turned. Nothing. Only the canyon, empty yet alive. The echoes laughed, or maybe sighed. I couldn't tell. I walked further, tracing the canyon's curve. The echoes twisted again, shaping warnings I hadn't spoken aloud. Each step made them sharper, closer. Knowing, the air vibrated with intent. I could feel the canyon's memory pressing against my mind. A sudden gust carried something warmer, human-like, brushing my skin. I froze. The shadows shifted. Rocks and dust moved as if breathing, pulsing with a rhythm I didn't recognize. The echoes carried familiarity, names, places, secrets only I would know. The hum of the wind intertwined with the canyon's voice. Every inhalation seemed measured, patient. I felt watched, not by eyes I could see, but by the canyon itself. It had remembered me. It had learned. I whispered again, cautiously. The echo responded instantly. It knew me. Every syllable, every pause, returned with a weight I couldn't place. A dread settled, slow and patient, under my ribs. I turned to leave. The path narrowed, cliffs pressing closer. Shadows clung to the edges, stretching toward me. The wind carried their murmurs, faintly human, almost urgent. I walked. Each echo followed, molding my words into reflections I hadn't spoken aloud. My heartbeat matched the canyon's pulse, slow and heavy. I felt the canyon leaning closer, waiting, patient. Finally, the canyon opened to a wider ledge. The echoes softened, murmuring behind me like a fading tide. I could still feel them tracing my steps, remembering. They weren't gone. I stepped out into sunlight. The canyon receded behind me, silent now. Yet I could still hear the faint hum, a whisper at the edge of thought, a soft memory of the canyon, patient and aware. I walked on, and it remembered me. The cave mouth yawned beneath a gray sky. Damp air wrapped around me, carrying the scent of wet stone and earth. A lantern in my hand flickered. throwing pale, dancing light across jagged stalactites. Shadows stretched long, curling along the walls. Shapes appeared in the corners of the light. Figures, almost human, almost familiar, but gone before I could focus. The floor was uneven, slick with moisture. Each step echoed softly, swallowed by the vastness above. The hum of the lantern's flame mingled with a faint, distant drip of water. I paused. A whisper brushed the edge of hearing, soft, patient, curling around the stones. I turned slowly, expecting nothing, but the cave seemed to lean in, waiting. Light danced over a stalactite cluster. A fleeting shape flickered at the edge of the lantern's glow. I reached toward it. It vanished, leaving only shadow and cold air against my skin. The whispers grew closer, soft, almost human, yet intangible. I could feel them curling around my arms, teasing, insistent. Every step made them stretch nearer. The stalactites hung like frozen teeth above me. The light revealed more shapes, impossible forms, shifting when I blinked. I brushed a hand along the wall. Cold, slick, rough. The air smelled of wet stone and something metallic. I stepped forward, carefully. The lantern trembled slightly in my grasp. A soft brush along my shoulder made me freeze. No one was there. The whispering hummed in response, patient, almost playful. The shapes lingered just out of reach. One paused, a fleeting figure in the glow, then melted back into shadow. I felt my chest tighten. My own heartbeat seemed loud, mingling with the cave's hum. I leaned closer to a cluster of stalactites. The air vibrated gently against my ear. A whisper, barely audible, seemed almost like a name. I reached out again, and it vanished. Silence followed. The hum of the lantern felt heavier, pressing against the stillness. The shadows waited, patient, stretching toward every flicker of light. I breathed slowly, careful, trying not to disturb them. I stepped back. The cave seemed to expand, swallowing the edges of the lantern's glow. Figures lingered, flickering, teasing with movement I could never fully grasp. The whispers softened, curling into nothingness. Finally, I turned toward the entrance. The cool, damp air brushed my face. Shadows receded, but the sense of being watched remained. The lantern's glow trembled one last time before I stepped into the open. The cave remained silent. I could feel its patience, its curiosity, following me in memory. I did not look back. Not yet. The cave was warm, yet a cold draft brushed my neck. It wasn't wind. It was deliberate, patient, soft, almost human. The walls glistened with moisture, the scent of wet stone, and earth pressed close. Every step I took echoed, swallowed, then returned altered. I was not alone. I moved slowly. Each motion felt mirrored, like another presence followed my rhythm. I turned my head. Nothing. Yet I could feel it, watching, learning, waiting. A hum rose from somewhere deep. No source I could find. It vibrated through the stone beneath my feet, into my chest, along my spine. I swallowed. My own breath seemed louder than it should. Shadows clung to the edges of the lantern light. They shifted when I wasn't looking directly at them. Faint forms leaned closer. The air pressed against my skin, cold and unyielding. I stopped. The hum pulsed in time with my heartbeat. A soft brush along my shoulder made my chest tighten. I dared not look. No one was there. The cave walls closed in. Drips of water fell with gentle insistence, echoing. Each echo seemed to follow me, twisting slightly, teasing. The hum deepened, patient, intimate. It was almost a whisper or a warning. I moved forward. The presence mimicked me perfectly. Every step I took, a step in tandem behind me. I could feel the breath, faint, deliberate, brushing my neck, tracing my hair. I paused again. The cave was quiet, yet vibrating. Shadows pulled where the lantern's light failed. A strange scent rose, metallic, like iron and damp stone. The hum carried through the air, resonating in the walls, in me. I dared to glance over my shoulder. Nothing visible. Only the empty stretch of stone, the dark, the hum. And still, I could feel it there, waiting. The light trembled in my hand. figures flickered at the corner of vision. I reached instinctively. They vanished, soft, deliberate, teasing. The cold pressed closer, patient. The hum shifted, almost conversational. I could feel a presence tracing my spine, matching my movements. Not angry, not playful, curious. I stepped backward. The cave seemed to expand, swallowing the edges of the light. Every motion mirrored, every breath matched by something unseen. I felt the weight of it, patient, lingering, intimate. Finally, I edged toward the entrance. The warmth outside met me, but the sensation lingered. The hum, the brush of breath, the mirrored movements. Quiet terror settled in my chest. I did not look back. The cave receded behind me. Its presence remained, patient, watching, and I knew it remembered. The forest was quiet, heavy with mist. Roots twisted across the ground, gnarled and thick, reaching toward the cave entrance like fingers. The air smelled of wet earth and moss, damp and alive. I stepped closer. The roots writhed subtly, curling in ways that didn't feel natural. Shadows stretched along the walls of the cave, shifting as if aware. The light trembled, flickering across dark stone. A faint rustle brushed past my ankle. I froze. Nothing moved, yet the sensation lingered. The shadows pulsed softly, like breathing in the dark. I crouched, tracing the roots with my fingers. Cold, slick, texture like rough bark, but alive. The smell of soil deepened, mingled with metallic tang I couldn't name. Soft hums, or maybe distant echoes, vibrated through the stones. I moved further into the cave mouth. Shapes flickered at the edge of vision, vanishing whenever I focused. Something shifted in the corner of the light. A presence, patient, retreating into darkness as I approached. The walls seemed closer now, narrowing the path. Shadows pulled in cracks and crevices, curling like smoke. I could feel them pressing at the edges of perception. The air carried a faint vibration, subtle, almost like whispered breaths. I took another step. The roots twisted tighter, curling across the floor as though to block my way. Shadows stretched toward me, patient and slow. The cave hummed with quiet intent, pressing against my chest. I paused. The sensation of being watched settled deeper in my mind. Soft footsteps, or echoes of mine, traced my path. I turned. Nothing. A faint chill ran along my spine. The shapes in the shadows shifted again, fleeting and deliberate. The roots seemed to pulse beneath my fingers, subtle, alive. The cave breathed softly around me, patient, indifferent, yet aware. I edged closer to the retreating presence. It seemed almost tangible, hovering in the dim light. I reached forward. It vanished, leaving only the scent of damp stone and cold earth. The shadows remained, stretching along walls and roots, patient, watching. The forest outside pressed against the cave entrance, silent, waiting. I could feel it, the quiet dread lingering like a held breath. I stepped back toward the opening. The mist curled around my ankles, soft and cold. The shadows did not follow, but their awareness did. A weight in the chest, a hum in the mind. I left the cave. Roots returned to stillness. Shadows clung to walls no longer visible. The presence remained in memory, patient, watching. And I walked on uneasy, certain it had not released me. The fog lay thick over the clearing. It curled around trees and stones, pale and heavy. The air was damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and cold moss. I stepped carefully, boots sinking into soft soil. Each movement stirred the mist, curling it around my ankles. The forest was silent, too silent. A figure appeared just beyond the fog, tall, pale, motionless. It stood watching, not moving, not breathing, or at least not in a way I could sense. My chest tightened. The figure remained patient, waiting. Shadows pulled around it, dissolving into mist. I could feel my pulse echo in my ears. I stepped closer. The mist swirled between us, damp against my skin. Each step made my heart thump louder. The figure did not shift. Only the fog moved. A rustle ran through the trees. I blinked. The figure dissipated, folding back into the mist as though it had never been there. Cold air brushed my neck. My breath came fast. The clearing seemed empty now, yet the silence carried weight, heavy, expectant. I could smell damp stone and moss, and feel the fog pressing against my cheeks. The mist lingered, slow and patient. I took a hesitant step forward. Shadows stretched and curled, forming shapes just at the edge of sight. The figure's absence made the space feel hollow, and yet I could feel it aware somewhere in the fog. The wind shifted. It carried a whisper, faint, almost human, brushing my ears. I shivered. The echo of my heartbeat matched the quiet rhythm of the clearing. I searched the fog. Nothing remained, yet a sense of wonder tinged the fear. The pale figure had been here, and it had noticed me. I stepped backward. The fog swirled with each motion, soft and pressing. Every step felt measured, watched. My own shadow stretched along the damp ground. Finally, I turned to leave. The clearing receded, pale shapes dissolving into mist. The figure was gone, but the memory lingered, patient, quiet, almost alive. I walked onward. The fog remained heavy, soft against my face, and somewhere in its folds, I could still feel those eyes, watching, waiting. The forest floor was soft beneath my knees. Damp leaves clung to my fingers, earthy and cold. A fog hovered low, pale and quiet, curling around roots and stones. I knelt, trying to hear. Soft scratching sounds came from deep below. At first, I thought it was roots settling, earth shifting, but the rhythm felt deliberate, patient. The ground seemed to breathe beneath my hands. A faint vibration ran through the soil, up my arms, into my chest. I could smell damp earth, moss, and something faintly metallic. The fog pressed closer, heavy and still. I leaned closer, holding my breath. The scratching intensified, deliberate, persistent. It moved beneath me, shifting with a life of its own. I felt a soft tug of cold air against my neck. I was not alone. I rose slowly, careful not to disturb the rhythm. The sounds followed, soft, rustling, deliberate. Each step I took echoed in the stillness, swallowed, then returned warped. The shadows along the route stretched toward me. I could feel them pressing at the edges of perception. The earth hummed faintly beneath my feet, a slow, pulsing vibration. My heartbeat matched it, growing louder, heavier. I stepped back. The scratching continued, relentless, patient. I could feel it moving closer beneath the soil. The fog curled higher, clinging to my ankles, damp and cold. I crouched again, hesitant. The vibration ran up my fingers into my spine. A faint whisper of something alive, unseen, brushing along the back of my mind. I dare not breathe too loudly. I retreated slowly. The scratching followed, matching my pace. It seemed aware of me, patient, observing. The forest felt vast, silent, and yet alive. Every rustle of leaves, every shift of the fog, carried intent. The soil seemed to remember each of my movements. The presence beneath pressed against it, waiting, slow, deliberate. I rose fully, stepping away from the spot. The fog thinned, the forest opened. Yeah, I could feel it, patient, unyielding. The earth whispered beneath me, soft, insistent. I walked on, uneasy, heart still hammering, knowing the rustling below would not forget. The cave was familiar, or so I thought. Damp stone walls rose around me, slick with moisture. The air smelled of wet earth, cold stone, and something faintly metallic. I turned a corner. A narrow passage appeared, carved into the rock. It hadn't been there before. I stepped closer, curiosity pulling me forward. The walls were etched with carvings. Faces, hands, strange symbols. They felt patient, ancient, and strangely deliberate. I traced a finger over the grooves. The stone was rough, cold, alive with history. A soft chanting rose from the darkness ahead. It was low, steady, almost imperceptible at first. The air thickened, heavy, pressing against my chest. I swallowed. The stone seemed to pulse in time with the rhythm. I glanced back. The passage had vanished. Nothing remained but blank rock. My pulse quickened. The carvings felt closer now, as if the walls had shifted. I stepped forward again. The chanting grew, threading through the air like breath. Shadows pooled along the floor, stretching and curling toward the passage. The light from my lantern trembled. I could smell damp stone, earth, and something faintly acrid like smoke or iron. I crouched to examine a carving. A face stared back, hollow eyes carved deep into the rock. It felt alive, watching, patient. The chanting wove around me, soft, deliberate, repeating words I didn't understand but somehow recognized. I moved forward careful. The passage reappeared. Narrow, dark, beckoning. Yet each time I turned my head, it vanished again, folding into the rock. The walls seemed closer, pressing. Shadows swirled at the edges of vision, curling like smoke. The chanting pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I could feel it vibrating through my chest, resonating in the damp stone beneath my feet. I reached for the passage. My hand brushed the cold stone, and it disappeared again. The carving seemed to shift just slightly, like eyes following me. The air was thick now, heavy and alive. I stepped back. The cave felt endless, repeating itself. The chanting faded, then returned, soft and insistent. I could hear my own breath in the stillness, mingling with the echoes of voices long gone. I turned slowly. The passage had vanished once more. Nothing remained but shadows, carvings, and a heavy, patient air. I breathed slowly, careful, pressing a hand against the cool stone. Finally, I moved away. The cave opened familiar corridors, damp and quiet. Yet the memory lingered, the soft chanting, the shifting stone, the vanishing passage. It waited, patient, and I knew it had not forgotten me. The cave walls glistened with moisture. Moss clung to stone, damp and cold beneath my fingers. Mineral stains ran like veins through the rock, dark and slick. I stepped closer. Faint shapes emerged in the patterns of moss and stone. Human forms, fleeting, dissolving when I blinked. Eyes, or the suggestion of eyes, seemed to linger at the edges of vision. The air was heavy, smelling of wet earth and mineral. A soft hum, almost imperceptible, vibrated through the walls. I felt in my chest, subtle, patient, like the stone itself was breathing. I couldn't look away. Shapes twisted, forming and dissolving in impossible ways. A face blinked, just a flicker, and vanished again. My pulse quickened, but I remained drawn toward it. Shadows pulled along the grooves of the walls. They stretched and shifted when I wasn't looking directly. The moss seemed to crawl under the light, curling toward me. I shivered. The damp air pressed against my skin, cold and clinging. I traced a finger over one fleeting shape. Rough stone beneath soft moss, cool and wet. The figure shifted slightly as if aware, withdrawing from my touch. A whisper movement, or maybe my imagination. I stepped back. The forms flickered again. Eyes blinked in the periphery. Always there, never fully seen. The cave felt alive, patient. Every small echo of my breath bounced back, distorted, altered. The shapes remained, teasing, indifferent. I could smell earth and moss deep in the stone, metallic beneath it. I leaned closer again. A face seemed to stretch, pulling toward the light of my lantern. It recoiled just as I reached toward it. I froze, heart hammering, yet I couldn't stop looking. Silence fell, thick and absolute. The shapes lingered, patient, barely moving. Eyes blinked slowly, corners of vision trembling. The air held its breath, and so did I. Finally, I stepped back. The cave widened, but the forms remained, etched into moss and stone. The stillness pressed around me, heavy and unnerving. I walked on uneasy, yet unable to forget the blinking eyes. And the stone remembered. The ledge jutted from the rock like a forgotten finger. Fog curled around its edges, pale and heavy. Below, the chasm yawned, dark and endless. I stepped closer. The wind whispered upward, carrying secrets I could almost understand. The air was damp, metallic, and pressed against my cheeks. I felt the stone beneath my feet tremble, subtle, insistent. Shadows pulled at the cliff's edge. The fog moved with the rhythm of some unseen presence. I bent slightly, peering into the blackness below. It seemed alive, breathing slowly, patiently. A low hum threaded through the air, vibrating the ledge beneath me. I swallowed. The whisper seemed to respond, curling around my ears, curling into my thoughts. Each exhale was heavy, each heartbeat mirrored by the stone. I stepped back, but the ledge resisted, subtle and unyielding. My foot barely shifted, yet I felt the earth cling, reluctant to let me leave. The fog pressed closer, damp fingers brushing my neck and arms. The darkness below was patient, waiting. I leaned over once more. Secrets whispered, soft, teasing. The edges of the ledge shivered slightly beneath my hands. The scent of wet stone and cold air filled my nose. The wind shifted, carrying more voices, distant, indistinct, faintly human. I turned to retreat. The ledge seemed alive, holding me, slow tremors pressing against my boots. Every step away was measured, resisted. I paused mid-step. The whispers lingered, curling into silence. The chasm yawned, dark and indifferent. The ledge trembled once more, subtle, a heartbeat beneath my feet. Finally I left. The fog wrapped around me, insulating the world outside. Yet the whispers, the tremors, the dark presence below, they followed in memory, patient and unyielding. The ledge remained behind, waiting, quiet, dreadful, and I knew it would remember me too. The cavern yawned beneath the forest floor. Damp stone walls rose around me, slick and cold. The air smelled of wet earth and mineral, heavy and still. A low hum vibrated through the ground. I felt it under my boots, up through my legs, into my chest. The walls seemed to pulse in time, subtle and patient. Shadows gathered along cracks and crevices, stretching toward me slowly. I stepped forward. The hum deepened, threading into my mind, soft and insistent. The stone felt alive beneath my fingers, vibrating in rhythm. A faint metallic tang hung in the air, mixed with damp moss. I paused. The shadows shifted, curling at the edges of vision. Each movement seemed deliberate, aware, yet impossible to grasp. My breath came shallow, echoing lightly against the walls. I traced a finger along the cavern, feeling tiny grooves and ridges. The hum pulsed stronger, resonating through my chest. The shadows pulled closer, patient and silent. I could smell the earth deeper now, rich, damp, and almost suffocating. I took another step. The vibration ran through me, subtle and hypnotic. I felt the stone respond, contracting underfoot. Shadows twisted, curling in ways that defied light and reason. The hum rose slightly, rhythmic, deliberate. It threaded into my thoughts, slow, insistent. I tried to focus on the walls, the damp stone, the cold under my fingertips. But the cavern seemed to breathe with me, alive and patient. I moved cautiously, each step measured. The shadows gathered nearer, pooling in corners and hollows. The humming thrummed softly against my ribs, mingling with the echo of my own heartbeat. The air pressed against me, damp and thick, carrying whispers of the stone itself. I knelt, brushing moss from a low wall. The vibration pulsed through my fingers. A shadow stretched toward me, then retracted, teasing, patient. The hum seemed to follow me, hypnotic, insistent. I rose, stepping back. The cavern pulsed, alive beneath the dim light. Shadows remained patient, curling at the edges of my vision. The hum lingered, threading through my mind, soft and slow, impossible to ignore. Finally, I retreated toward the entrance. The air thinned slightly, carrying the scent of earth and damp stone. The shadows did not follow, but the memory of their patient presence remained. And the hum, it echoed still, low and persistent, in the hollow of my chest. The cave opened before me, damp and quiet. Stale air clung to my skin, cold and heavy. Stone walls glistened faintly, slick with moisture and shadow. I took a step. Soft footsteps echoed mine, but not quite mine, slightly delayed. A heartbeat behind me, yet invisible. I paused. The echo did not. It lingered, patient, deliberate. The air smelled of damp earth and mineral, thick and pressing. I shivered. Shadows pulled along the walls. They shifted subtly, curling at the edges of perception. The floor under my boots felt alive, humming faintly, responding. Each echoing step followed, slow, inevitable. I moved again. The footsteps mirrored me, soft, measured, slightly out of sync, always behind. The cave seemed aware, watching, patient. A distant drip, echoed through the hollow. I felt it in my chest more than heard it, a vibration in the stone beneath the soles of my boots. The air carried a metallic tang, faint and lingering. I slowed, careful. The steps behind me slowed too, then quickened, teasing. I turned my head. Nothing there, just shadows stretching along walls, curling in ways that felt deliberate. The cave breathed with me. Every exhale pressed against the walls. Every movement was mirrored. I tried to ignore it, but the soft, persistent steps followed. I paused again. The echoing did not. It lingered, patient, insistent. A faint rustle drifted through the corners of my vision, along with the footsteps. I edged forward, cautious, boots pressing into wet stone. The echo followed, always behind, patient, relentless. Shadows clung to cracks and grooves, stretching toward me. The air pressed heavy and damp, carrying whispers of the stone itself. I stopped. The echoing stopped, just for a moment, then began again, soft, deliberate, perfectly out of sync. The cave was alive, patient, observing. I stepped back slowly, each motion measured, careful. The footsteps echoed still, teasing, unrelenting. The walls seemed to lean closer, the shadows curling tighter. The air hummed faintly with anticipation. Finally, I left the chamber. The cave behind remained patient, echoing each step I'd taken. The sound lingered in memory, soft and deliberate, following me long after I turned away. The cave narrowed, walls damp and cold under my palms. Stone pressed against my fingers, slick with moisture and shadow. The air smelled of wet earth, heavy and still, curling into my lungs. I touched the wall. It shivered beneath my hand. Not solid, not still, a subtle pulse, like a heartbeat echoing through stone. Whispers drifted from the cracks, unintelligible. Soft murmurs, curling in the damp air. I leaned closer, trying to catch words. They eluded me, teasing, patient. The stone vibrated again. My palm tingled with its rhythm. The air thickened, pressing against my face and chest. Cold and damp, yet magnetic, drawing me closer. Shadows clung to the grooves of the wall. They twisted and stretched when I wasn't looking. The whispers rose slightly, threading into my thoughts, subtle and insistent. I swallowed hard. I pressed my ear to the wall. The pulse matched the slow, steady heartbeat. The whispers curled closer, brushing my cheek. The scent of wet stone deepened, metallic and damp. I stepped back slightly. The wall seemed aware, trembling subtly under my fingers. The shadows gathered, pooling in corners, patient, deliberate. The whispers murmured again, soft and impossible to understand. I touched the stone again. It pulsed beneath me, alive and patient. The air pressed heavy around me, suffocating and compelling. I could feel it in my chest, in my breath, in my skin. The vibration slowed, then quickened, teasing, irregular. Shadows moved at the edge of my vision, curling inward. I felt drawn, compelled, unable to leave. The whispers lingered, patient and insistent. I finally tore my hand away. The pulse remained, faint beneath the stone. The air stayed thick, almost suffocating, and I knew the wall remembered. I stepped back. Silence fell, heavy and unnatural. The shadows waited. The whispers lingered. The wall shivered still, patient, aware, eternal. The cave was quiet, damp and cold. Lantern light trembled in my hands, pale and uneven. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting in rhythm with the flame. I stepped forward. Forms flickered, fleeting shapes along jagged rock. Some were vague, dissolving before I could focus. But one lingered. It mimicked me. Every movement, every small shift mirrored exactly. I froze. The air thickened, damp against my skin. My breath came shallow, echoing faintly in the hollow space. The shadow was wrong. It moved without hesitation, without the slight lag of light and flesh. It clung to the wall, patient, deliberate. A faint metallic scent drifted, mingling with the cold dampness of the cave. I held the lantern closer. The flickering light revealed edges of jagged stone, wet and glistening. The shadow remained. It did not belong. Not here. I tried to step back. My boots pressed into the slick stone, careful, slow. The shadow mirrored each retreat, impossibly precise. A low hum threaded through the cave, vibrating softly beneath my feet. I blinked, hoping it would vanish, but it remained patient, unyielding. Shadows in other corners shifted and collapsed into darkness. This one stayed. I could feel it in the marrow of my bones. The air pressed heavy around me, suffocating, thick. The lantern trembled in my grip. I realized I hadn't moved it. The shadow had, a soft rustling, like breath against the walls. I froze completely, chest tight, ears straining. The shadow moved slightly closer, deliberate, silent. It was waiting, watching. I took a careful step backward. It mirrored me. A chill ran along my spine. The cave was alive, and this shadow was not part of it. I lowered the lantern slowly. The flame quivered. The shadow remained, patient and deliberate, clinging to the stone as if it had always been there. I left the chamber. The echo of my footsteps bounced softly, but the shadow did not follow. It waited, lingering in the corner of vision, silent, patient, eternal. The tunnel stretched before me, dark and endless. Cold stone pressed damp against my palms. The air smelled of wet earth and mineral, heavy in my chest. A voice called softly, low, almost a sigh. It said words I had never spoken aloud. Yet they curled around me, familiar and impossible. I froze. The shadows clung to the walls, stretching and flickering with my heartbeat. The voice repeated, patient, deliberate. Each syllable pulled me forward. I knew I shouldn't follow. It felt wrong, but irresistible, like gravity twisting toward some unseen center. The floor was slick beneath my boots. A faint hum vibrated through stone under my feet. The voice whispered again, intimate, personal. It named things I had thought only I knew, secrets I had never spoken. I swallowed hard. The air pressed heavy, damp and suffocating. Yet I could not resist the pull. Each step forward made the darkness grow thicker. Each breath tasted metallic and cold. Shadows shifted at the edges of my vision. I sensed movement without sound. The walls seemed to lean inward, patient and alive. The voice trailed after me, soft, deliberate, persistent. I wanted to turn. My instinct screamed, but my legs moved anyway, slow, hesitant, drawn. The whispers curled around my mind, subtle and insistent. A faint rustle of stone beneath my fingers. I reached toward the wall. The voice repeated a thought I had never spoken. My skin prickled with dread. The air pulsed, thick and almost tactile. I paused. The voice paused, matching me perfectly, then continued, dragging me deeper. The cave seemed alive, breathing with me, watching. I realized with sudden, cold clarity. It knew me, not just my presence. Every secret, every fear. I stepped backward, slow, careful. The whispers followed, patient, teasing. The air vibrated faintly, pressing against my skin, as if the darkness itself were coaxing me onward. I turned to leave. The voice lingered in the shadows, soft, deliberate, unyielding. It faded only as the tunnel curved, but I knew it waited patient, eternal. The cave was colder than I expected. A damp, earthy scent clung to the walls. My boots pressed into uneven stone, echoing softly in the hollow space. Fragments of bone lay scattered. Old, weathered, unidentifiable. They seemed arranged, not random. Careful. I knelt, fingers hovering above the jagged edges. The air felt heavier here, thick with silence. A faint hum, like breath beneath the earth, vibrated underfoot. Shadows stretched along the walls. Each flicker of my lantern revealed shapes, moving subtly, though I could see no one. A whisper of movement. Static. Alone. I leaned closer to examine a fragment. It was brittle, chalky, aged. The smell of old stone mixed with something metallic, faint and almost alive. The arrangement of bones tugged at something deep inside. A pattern deliberate. I traced it with my eyes, following the curves, the spacing. A shiver ran along my spine. I stood, lantern trembling slightly in my hands. The silence pressed against my ears. I sensed it then. A presence. Watching. Patient. Silent, the cave breathed around me. Cold air swept past, brushing my neck. Rustling, faint, as if something moved just beyond the lantern's light. I stepped forward. The fragments crunched softly beneath my boots. Shadows leapt, coalescing in corners. The weight of eyes, unseen, settled on my back. The arrangement of bones seemed to shift when I looked away. Or maybe my mind did. I dared not glance for too long. The air felt charged, electric with something I could not name. A soft, indistinct whisper brushed the edge of hearing. It carried neither words nor meaning. Yet it urged, patient, coaxing, a low hum beneath the skin. I tried to back away. The bones seemed closer somehow. The shadows deeper. The presence more intent, deliberate, aware. I exhaled slowly. Fingers curled around the lantern handle. The metallic scent thickened, mingling with the damp stone. A breath, cold, brushed my cheek. I did not turn. I walked, careful, deliberate. The fragments crunched behind me. Yet I could not see anyone. The cave seemed alive, waiting. I paused at the edge of the chamber. The silence stretched, dense and patient. Shadows lingered. The pattern of bones remained. Something watched still, unseen. I felt it in the marrow of my bones. And I left, leaving the fragment arranged in quiet purpose. The presence lingering, eternal, silent, patient. The cave stretched before me, hollow and cold. A thin fog clung to the floor, curling around jagged stones. It smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic. I stepped forward slowly. My boots pressed into wet rock. Each echo bounced back, soft, distorted, as if the cave itself were listening. The fog thickened. Walls disappeared beneath its weight. Shapes drifted within, vague, fleeting. Something moved at the edge of vision, then vanished when I tried to focus. A hum rose in the distance, low, vibrating, almost musical. It stirred the fog, which twisted around my ankles. I shivered, though the cave was not cold. A shadow shifted behind a column of stone. I held my breath. The sound, soft, almost like laughter, lingered in the fog, echoing from nowhere, from everywhere. I reached out. Fingers brushed damp air, cold and thick. The shape seemed to recoil, then drifted closer again. It was impossible to tell. Solid or imagined. I moved deeper. The hum grew louder. The fog curled into my hair, clung to my skin. Every footstep seemed mirrored, another presence pacing, always just behind. I paused. Silence stretched between the echoes. The fog swirled, rising, falling, like breath beneath the stone. A figure appeared briefly, pale, indistinct, shifting. It did not approach. It did not retreat. It simply existed, suspended in the mist. The air vibrated softly. It tugged at my chest. Shapes continued to dance, edges blurred, forms impossible to name. I felt watched, not by eyes, but by intent. I swallowed. The hum twisted into a melody I could not recognize. It carried over stone, over fog, and into my skin, whispering along my spine. I stepped back. Fog followed. Every movement seemed magnified. Every sound echoed in strange intervals. Footsteps, rustling, whispers, none my own. The shapes gathered near the edges. None solid. All present. I could not look away, and yet I could not move closer. The cave inhaled around me. The fog rose, thick, undulating. Shadows merged with mist, creating forms that should not exist. I turned slowly. The shapes drifted with me. The melody lingered, soft, impossible, hypnotic. I exhaled. The fog hung heavy, obscuring walls, ceiling, floor. Shapes ebbed and flowed. Silent, observing, patient. I stepped toward the light at the cave's mouth. It felt distant. The fog resisted, curling around ankles and hands, pulling me back, urging me to linger. I paused. The hum faded slightly. Shapes blurred once more. A quiet tension filled the space, suspense without form. And then I left. The fog lingered. The shapes remained. And the melody, faint, impossible, followed me out into the open air. The fog pressed thick against the walls of the cave. It clung to my clothes, curled around my ankles, a damp, earthy smell mixed with something faintly metallic. I stepped forward, boots pressing into slick stone. The echoes of each movement returned, slow, distant, distorted. It was as if the cave itself were listening. Then I saw them, pairs of eyes, pale and glinting, hovering just beyond the fog. I blinked. They were gone. I slowed my steps. The fog twisted, curling, hiding shapes that shimmered in the edges of vision. A soft rustle moved behind me. Nothing visible, yet impossible to ignore. Another pair of eyes appeared, just for a moment, then vanished when I tried to focus. I swallowed, heart ticking too fast. Something was watching. I moved deeper. The air thickened, damp and heavy. Each breath tasted of stone and wet earth. Every footstep echoed, but the rhythm felt wrong. The eyes returned, always at the corner of my vision, blinking, waiting. When I turned, only fog. I felt their attention sharpen. It pressed against me, patient and knowing. A cold draft brushed my neck. I shivered despite the warmth of the cave. The hum of distant wind carried through the mist, twisting, almost like whispers. I crouched, trying to see better. Shapes move in the fog, impossible to define. Eyes glimmered and disappeared. Each time, closer than before. I exhaled slowly. The cave seemed alive. The mist shifted with purpose. Soft footsteps, though mine alone, seemed accompanied by another rhythm, slightly out of sync. I straightened. The pairs of eyes returned. They lingered just beyond perception, watching, waiting, not malicious but insistent, demanding awareness. I took another step. The fog swallowed it. Shapes swirled. The eyes blinked again, and for a heartbeat, I thought they smiled. A whispering wind moved through the cave. Not words I could understand, just tones, low and pulling, wrapping around my chest and shoulders. The fog moved with it, curling like fingers. I froze. The eyes multiplied. Not hundreds, but many, all vanished in the moment I looked directly. I felt tension rising, like the cave was waiting for me to make a mistake. I exhaled slowly, tried to listen with more than my ears. The fog shivered with every small movement. Shapes appeared, then dissolved. I could feel the tension pressing closer. A low hum rose, almost musical. It flowed through the fog, through my bones. The eyes seemed to drift toward it, then vanish again. I stepped back. The fog followed. Every step mirrored, every sound doubled. The pairs of eyes lingered at the edge of sight, watching, always watching. I wanted to leave, to run toward the faint light at the cave's mouth. But each step made the fog curl higher, thicker, heavier. The eyes did not move, but the sense of being observed grew unbearable. Finally, I exhaled, slow and measured. The cave seemed to settle slightly. Shapes softened. The eyes remained in the periphery, patient, quiet, unseen, a presence that would not leave. I turned, walked back toward the opening. The fog followed, and somewhere within it, the eyes waited, blinking just beyond attention, never solid, always watching. The cave breathed around me. A faint draft curled along the walls, carrying the damp scent of stone and moss. My footsteps pressed softly against the earth, echoed back, almost too precisely. I paused. The echo lingered, then shifted just a fraction off. It wasn't mine. I looked around. Nothing moved, but the feeling stayed. Heavy, constant, like something, was there always just beyond sight. The air felt thick. Each inhalation tasted of mineral and quiet. The shadows along the jagged walls twisted, stretching like fingers reaching for me. A leaf drifted from a fissure above. I heard it brush the ground, and somewhere behind me, a second rustle matched it. Too soft to be certain, too deliberate to ignore. I tried to move forward. The cave seemed to resist. My footfall slowed. Every step was mirrored subtly, twisted in timing, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. I touched the wall. It felt cold and damp, almost alive, pulsing faintly. And somewhere beyond the curve of the passage, I sensed a presence, still and patient. The shadows shifted again, not like normal shadows. They lingered longer, hovering in corners that shouldn't exist. A whisper of movement brushed my ear. No words, just a breath I hadn't taken. I tried to steady myself. The fog in the cave clung to my clothes, to my hair, wrapping me in silence. A silence that wasn't empty. It was full of waiting. I stepped deeper. The echo of my footfalls trailed behind, and something followed it. A soft, delayed mimicry that kept pace with me without ever appearing. I crouched, listening. The presence didn't move, but I could feel it shift in awareness. A weight against the back of my mind. Heavy, insistent, invisible. The walls breathed faintly with the cave. A hum rose beneath the stone, almost musical. The echoed movements around me seemed to pulse with it. I was not alone. I exhaled slowly. The air pressed in. Every sound, the rustle of stones, my shallow breath, was mirrored, twisted, like a second version of reality. I wanted to turn back. But even as I retraced my steps, the feeling persisted. Constant, watching, patient. The shadows along the walls shifted again. A corner seemed to darken more than others. A shape, or perhaps just the absence of light, trembled faintly. I could not tell if it was real, or if the cave itself was playing with me. My hand brushed damp stone. The pulse beneath my fingers slowed. Yet behind me, the mirrored echoes continued, a quiet cadence that followed each heartbeat, each breath. I swallowed. The cave smelled of wet earth and something older, something that had always been here. Watching, I moved forward slowly. The fog thickened, curling around my boots and ankles. The echoed movement stayed just out of reach, always present, never appearing, yet undeniably there. I stopped. The silence grew heavier. No sound but my own, and yet I knew, somewhere just beyond awareness, the watcher waited, patient, invisible, constant. I exhaled. The air shifted. The cave seemed to breathe with me, and the fog embraced the stillness. I took another step, feeling the unseen eyes on me, always unrelenting, and yet utterly silent. The cave's mouth yawned before me, fog curling in from the forest like slow breath. The air smelled of damp stone and moss, sharp against the faint warmth of the morning sun. I stepped inside. The ground was cold underfoot, a mix of loose gravel and slick stone. A silence settled around me, heavy, patient. Then it spoke, or perhaps the walls did. A whisper, soft and familiar, repeating a fragment of memory I hadn't spoken aloud. I froze. The echo shifted slightly. The words I thought I remembered, now twisted, subtle, wrong. A laugh from childhood, a voice I had long forgotten, but altered, as if the cave itself remembered differently. The shadows along the walls flickered. Each stalagmite stretched upward like a pale finger. The echo returned, softer now, folding another memory, one I wasn't sure had ever happened. I swallowed. The taste of damp stone lingered on my tongue. My heartbeat thumped in sync with the hum of the cavern, and each echo mirrored it. Not exactly my rhythm, but close enough to feel wrong. I walked deeper. The echo followed, repeating moments I had held privately, softly reshaping them into whispers I had never imagined. My footfalls pressed against the stone, and behind me, the sound lingered like someone tracing each step with invisible fingers. The air grew thick, humid. It clung to my skin, cool against my warmth, wrapping my shoulders, my neck. Every rustle of stone, every shift of breath, was returned to me, slightly altered, slightly uncanny. I paused by a fissure. A cold draft stirred, brushing my cheek. The echo returned again, repeating a memory I didn't even recognize. A small, secret moment from years ago, spoken as if I had said it here before, but I hadn't. I leaned close to the wall, tracing its jagged edge with fingertips. The stone was rough, almost pulsing beneath my touch. And the echo, always slightly behind, slightly ahead, continued to reshape my memories. My mind twisted. Was the cave real? Or was I inside the echo itself, a chamber of memory and stone? The line blurred. The walls seemed to breathe with me, closing and expanding, and each echo now hummed with awareness. A shadow shifted, just at the edge of vision. I blinked. It was gone. Yet the echo lingered, soft and knowing, sliding through the spaces between breath and thought. I took a careful step forward. The gravel crunched beneath my boots, a harsh note in the soft, bending hum. Behind me it repeated, not quite my sound, but intimately close, like a mirror slightly warped. The cave narrowed. The walls leaned in, pale stone pressing against the dim light filtering from above. Each echo grew bolder, pulling memories I hadn't recalled in decades, softly twisting them, folding them into the silence. I wanted to leave, but the echoes, they knew me, and yet I knew them not at all. The cave seemed infinite, stretching farther than the eye could see, filled with soft whispers of things I thought were mine, yet weren't. I inhaled. The air tasted cold and metallic, tinged with moss and wet stone. A faint rustling of unseen wings, or perhaps just the echo again, slid across my skin, sending a shiver through my spine. I paused. The cave held me in that moment. The air thick, still humming with altered memories. The echo whispered, ever soft, repeating fragment of life I thought I knew, bending them into something new, something I could not place. I exhaled slowly, listening, feeling the cave press in. The echo settled around me, a quiet companion, an invisible presence, folding memory and stone into one. I stepped forward again. The cave swallowed my movement. The echo followed, slightly behind, slightly ahead, always knowing, always patient, and I could not tell where I ended and the cave began. The cave stretched before me, its walls damp and cool against my skin. Lanterns hung from hooks, pale glows trembling over stone. The air smelled faintly of smoke and wet earth, and each breath felt heavy, slow, deliberate. I took a step forward. The first lantern flickered. A shadow danced across the wall, long, thin, unnatural. The second lantern followed. Its light died quietly, as if the darkness itself had crept closer to claim it. I could feel the shift, the air growing thicker, a soft hum vibrating through the stone beneath my feet. The shadows lengthened. They stretched and bent in ways that made the walls seem alive. I paused, the tip of my fingers brushing against the cold stone. A shiver slid down my spine. The hum grew slightly louder, or maybe I imagined it, a subtle pressure against my chest, pulling me deeper into the dark. I moved cautiously. Every exit I tried seemed farther than it had been. The paths twisted strangely, as if the cave itself were rearranging, shaping corridors into dead ends and loops. Yet panic did not rise. I could not summon it. Only calm, soft, unnatural acceptance. Lanterns flickered again. 1, 2, 3, and then nothing. The world became a gray wash. Stone melting into shadow, and shadow folding into deeper shadow. I walked slowly, feet pressing against cold, wet stone, feeling for edges, for change, for some anchor. The air smelled of damp minerals and faint smoke, a reminder of what had been, or perhaps of what I imagined. Shapes moved just at the edge of sight. Tall, thin shadows, swaying slightly, mirroring my steps, yet always a heartbeat behind. I whispered to myself, soft, internal, reflective, but my words were absorbed instantly, returned as nothing but the shifting echoes of shadow. The cave seemed to breathe. Walls pulsed subtly, soft vibrations under my hands, the darkness pressing closer with every exhale. My fingers traced cracks in the stone, feeling moisture and roughness, but the shapes that lingered in the corner of vision, they did not touch. They only watched, patient, silent. I found another passage. Its opening seemed solid, yet when I turned to leave, it vanished. Stone and shadow replaced the path I had stepped through, a gentle closing of doors I had not opened. I exhaled slowly. Acceptance settled, soft and strange. The cave did not frighten me. It simply was. The final lantern flickered once more. Then it too faded. The world became muted gray, stone and shadow indistinguishable. I could feel the cold air brushing my cheeks, smell the dampness of the cavern in deeper, sharper breaths. Every step I took echoed faintly, then blended into the silence. I paused. The darkness did not advance. It did not retreat. It simply existed, patient, eternal, and I existed within it, not afraid, not resisting, just present. The shadows moved with me. They mirrored my steps, but never quite in sync. The cave had claimed its rhythm, and I followed. A gentle rustling drifted from unseen corners. Perhaps wind. Perhaps the cave itself breathing. Perhaps nothing at all. I let my shoulders fall. I let the stone and shadow press gently against my awareness. Every exit blocked, every lantern extinguished, yet a strange stillness kept me calm. I walked forward, one step, another. The darkness did not bite. It did not mock. It simply held me, and in that quiet I understood. Some lights fade not to end, but to reveal what always was. The cave, the shadows, the hum of stone, all patient, all eternal. I breathed, slowly. The world was gray, shadows long, and I unafraid. The cave narrowed around me. Stone walls glistened faintly with moisture. The air was cool, heavy and still. Every breath felt deliberate, every step swallowed by silence. I reached the deepest chamber. The ceiling dropped lower. The floor was uneven, damp under my fingers. Shadows pulled in corners, softly shifting as if alive, yet never approaching. I stopped. Nothing moved except the faint tremor in the stone beneath my hands. The silence pressed in, thick and palpable. It was not empty. It was aware, patient, eternal. The air smelled of earth and stone, and a subtle hum vibrated through the walls, so low it might have been my own heartbeat. I reached out, tracing rough surfaces, feeling mineral and moss cool against my skin. The shadows lingered at the edge of sight, never fully there, never gone. I took a step forward. The floor seemed to shift subtly beneath me, soft, almost imperceptible vibrations. The presence was all around, never threatening, but never leaving. A calm awareness wrapped me, like being held in the pause between breaths. I breathed slowly. The quiet filled my mind. Footsteps echoed softly, though no one followed. Rustling whispered at the edges of thought, like the cave exhaling through stone. Shapes flitted at the periphery. Shadows elongated and folded into themselves. I wanted to turn my head, to look directly, but something told me not to. To see would change nothing, yet the awareness would remain. I sank to my knees. Cold stone pressed against my palms. The stillness was absolute. No echo returned from my voice. Even my heartbeat seemed muted. A faint tremor ran through the ground. I felt it through my bones, the deep, ancient pulse of the hollow. It was comforting and terrifying, a reminder that this place had existed long before me, and would remain long after. I ran my fingers over the rough wall. The texture was uneven, mineralized, slightly damp. The shadows responded subtly, stretching, bending, as if aware of my touch. I exhaled slowly, letting the calm seep into me. The cave did not hunger. It did not mock. It simply was. I simply was within it. I rose slowly, the air vibrating faintly against my skin, soft whispers threading through the silence. No language, only presence. Eternal. I realized then I was alone. Truly, entirely alone. Not frightened, not lonely, just aware. A part of the hollow, yet separate. I traced my steps back in memory. Every passage, every flickering shadow, every whisper hum led here. And here at the center, the cave held me in quiet understanding. I pressed my palms against the stone again, felt the cold seep into me, the damp, the rough, the subtle pulse beneath. The hollow did not judge. It did not demand. It simply existed, and I existed with it. I sank to the floor once more. The stillness embraced me, the shadows folding gently, the air pressing softly around my shoulders. No lanterns, no light, no escape. Only the cave and only me. I understood then, fully, that I would always be within this space. Not trapped, not lost, simply present, alone. And in that acceptance, the isolation felt neither cruel nor harsh. It simply was. I breathed slowly. Stone under my hands, cold and rough. Shadows pooling quietly, soft and eternal. I exhaled. The hollow remained, and I remained within it.